Thank you again for being here. However you are connecting, it is a significant weekend in the life of our church, and I find I'm just filled up with gratitude and so grateful to be here with you in this way today. So now I invite you to take a few deep breaths, to let yourself arrive, to hear whatever it is you need to hear from Spirit today. And as you are moved, I invite you to join me in the preacher's prayer from the Psalms. Gracious God, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Back to my yard, for those of you who were here last week. There is a new and surprisingly large patch of mushrooms, different shapes and sizes with tops too big to stand much longer, and they have spread out like they own the place. But the wild thing is there was really nothing there for a long time but some grass and the usual rocks, and is as if seemingly suddenly overnight there was a whole mushroom festival. Has anyone else had that happen in your yard? As Robin Wall Kimmerer writes, there's a world of being full of unseen energies that animate everything. And we heard about the term Papawawi, which translates as the force which causes mushrooms to push up from the earth overnight. Unseen energies that animate everything. And I did find myself wondering as I stood there sort of in awe of what had happened so quickly. I thought, is there anything we can learn from this? We human beings, from this incredible world of unseen energies that animate everything? So for those who missed last Sunday, we are in our second week of exploring what we can learn from non-human organisms, and we're sticking with the book Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a real gem, and we'll do that for next week and then shift to other things for the month of September. But you know what I realized? I said we would be learning from plants, which is true for the other weeks, but if you don't already know, mushrooms, they're not really plants. They're fungi, which is in a category all of their own, and it includes, rusts, mold, yeast, and there are 144,000 known species. Isn't that wild? So we were laughing earlier when I was telling my husband what I would be exploring today. He's like, baby, you really got to talk, if you're talking about mushrooms, like some people are just immediately going to go. So I did look into this surprising unfolding that something like an estimated of 5 million Americans this year partook of psilocybin mushrooms. And because it's legal in parts of the Denver metro area, some people are starting to kind of ask me about it. So I did a little digging in just to provide you this long asterisk. And I have concluded, not as a medical expert, but it seems like in the therapeutic context, which is, could be widely interpreted perhaps, some people do experience benefits in terms of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, that kind of thing. So this is not to say I personally believe partaking in all circumstances is good for us, but I do think there's something perhaps to learn. But I'm totally not going that direction today. But just for those of you who are like mushrooms, wondering where that was going to come up. So just to say that. So today we're learning about what mushrooms can teach us as they show up in the world. And mushrooms, it turns out, are real true connectors and experienced communicators. They are garbage collectors and genius recyclers of what isn't wanted. In the Scientific American, Jennifer Fraser wrote, "No tree is an island, and no place is that truer than the forest. Hidden beneath the soil is a labyrinth of fungal connections between tree roots that scientists call the mycorrhizal network, and others have called it, I love this, the wood wide web. Certain varieties of mushrooms are called tree helpers because they support the process of absorbing water and minerals for the tree. And the tree, in return, gives the mushrooms the nutrients they need. Scientists have learned that trees literally exchange messages through mushrooms, living in the root system in a mutualistic relationship. I love this, that mushrooms and fungi thrive from a life of interdependence, of sharing and supporting even outside their species. They show up after fires, they show up in the trunk of dead trees, and they even take what is toxic and turn it into food. I know we have some really smart, well-read people and even some scientists among us, so maybe you already know that most plants make their food by photosynthesis. We get our food by internally digesting it, but fungi don't use either of these processes. Isn't that wild? They grow their mycelium around the food source, and they secrete enzymes that digest the food externally. Maybe this is some wisdom for us. They go right to the source of what they need, and they work out a relationship that works for everyone. They communicate openly about what is needed in the equation for all to thrive. All of these interactions really are small in the scale of the cosmos, and I bet most of them would need instruments for us to even perceive what is happening. But I love knowing all that happens below the surface, connecting, communicating, sharing, mutuality, interdependence, and healing, which gets me to the gospel, and I bet you were wondering when I would get there from mushrooms. But I think that is one excellent definition of healing, is what we do with the toxins in our life, the ones given to us and the ones we encounter by circumstance, to transform those into nutrients. That's what this story in the Gospel of Luke is partly about, because it features a woman who in this text is given no name and who has been hurting for 18 years, bent over and unstable, unable to stand up. And it isn't the best day, the proper day for Jesus to be a part of her healing, but he does it anyway. And as you heard, he is chastised by an angry leader who is telling him this wasn't the right way to do it. And Jesus reminds them that even the animals on site are getting tended to, so why not her? There seems to be an urgency in Jesus that the others don't feel. And it got me thinking that perhaps he's trying to share the thing we also heard from the mushrooms. Even though in this world we have built where healthcare and healing aren't available to all, with Jesus and the mushrooms, that's not true. If you are in need of attention, the love is right there. The healing is right there. What is needed is right there. The tiniest connection matters for the whole. And so I wonder if part of what we are meant to take away from this story is how these tiny interactions in the scale of the cosmos really are significant and bigger than we can perceive. It might be easy to chastise those who Jesus labeled as hypocrites that day in the story. I guess we humans like scapegoats and villains, and we also like to imagine that if we were in the story, we would have been on the side of compassion. But I'm not so sure. I have seen firsthand, and maybe you have too, what can happen with the pressure from a crowd. But still, he does the right thing, and I wonder if his actions here point us to the power, to the significance of healing, that just one person, one part, one place, what if it actually matters to the whole thing? In her book, Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Shaping Worlds, Adrienne Maree Brown offers incredible insights on how healing and deep system change begins with shaping the smallest patterns of our daily lives. She writes about mushrooms and how they show us resilience in their structures, how incomprehensible scale offers the clarity of identity. She says mushrooms take the substances we think of as toxic and process them as food. What if this story invites us to consider the power we have to shape what we want with our little choices, the daily patterns of our life, regardless of what the crowd says? What if we could see ourselves like mushrooms as part of a labyrinth of compassionate connections between the roots of other beings? What if we tended to even what seem like insignificant connections? And here's another lesson that emerged from our conversation earlier after the 9 o'clock. It turns out mushrooms are really, really hard to cultivate. And really how you grow them is allowing for certain kinds of conditions. I think that's an important takeaway for us in life too. What if tending to the tiniest connections, allowing for certain conditions, can grow and shift and heal something in a bigger way, beyond what we can see on the surface? What if doing what we can right now, being a part of healing hurt, matters more than doing it perfectly, or how the crowd tells us from a distance what is the right way? And knowing there are always things going on below the surface gives me hope, allows us to have room for some faith that someday, somehow, sometime, somehow, things will pop up and everything is different. So, beloved of God, be willing to go right to what you need and communicate openly and work out something that works for all. Let us be about connecting, sharing freely, giving to relationships of mutuality and interdependence. We have the power in every moment to decide whether our actions will transform toxins into nutrients and contribute to healing or not. What if we learned from the world of being full of unseen energies that animate everything? Maybe we could all be a bit more like mushrooms. May it be so. Amen. I invite you to join us now in a few moments of communal silence.